Hey everyone, this is Mike with SingleGameDFS.com and fantasyfifteensports.com. We are about to start slates, showdown slates and single game slates where we can use college football. And I wanted to show you how we put together some data for college football selections and come up with our projections. So one thing we can see here, today's a Monday, it's Monday, August 19th. College football starts on Saturday, the 24th. So we have this week to figure out who to put into this contest. The only contest listed on this week for DraftKings is Miami at Florida. So we'll take a look at that contest. So one thing to note in DraftKings, the difference between baseball and college football, when you go to draft your teams, you don't get a lot of help with the starting lineup. This is the big factor in college sports for fantasy, single game daily fantasy for college sports. You don't get probable starters help from DraftKings or FanDuel. So you got to figure it out, and that's the tough part. You got to just figure out who's playing in the game. So we do a couple things to try to determine that. And if you look here, let me get the right lineup to start with, or the right slate. You have probably, well, let's not guess. Let's just actually take a look. See how many players we have to choose from. When really only about 10 per each team will be in play. We have, let's just take a look here. So we'll export the lineup of potential players. They give us data or choices for 171 players on these two college football teams. Almost 100 players per team that we could potentially put into our lineups. Way too many. You can see the points potential, the average points. A lot of them are zeros. A lot of them shouldn't even be choices. So our challenge is to narrow down this field of players and pick the right ones. Obviously, that's what the challenge in any daily fantasy event, including a showdown. But that's the big challenge for college because you don't know a lot of these players. They're not everyday names. You don't see them every day. You don't know them like you know the pro teams. You don't see them in the news as often, and it takes a lot of research to try to figure out who to play. So that's our big challenge, and that's what we're going to try to do here today in picking a lineup for this Miami at Florida Game 1 showdown of the 2019-2020 season. So one thing we do, we have our optimizer here. One thing we do is we try to determine the starters. And I've come up with 21 starters that I think, or 21 players that I think will produce points in this contest, not 179. And this is the shot I'm taking. This is the line in the sand I'm drawing. I'm not going to use a little bit of everybody of a 90-person potential pool. I'm going to use 21 people that I think can come up with points and help me win this contest. So I do that in a number of ways. One way to try to do it is go to CBS Sportsline. Go to CBS Sportsline or sportsline.com. I think it's a CBS network-based website. And you can go to college football. Here I think is the easier way to look at it. Just go to the college football player projections page. Pick the contest. And this will show you the likely starters for this contest. All right, and I'm only going to use these 21 guys in my projection field. Okay, so I list them here. I put their basic data down, and then I put some fantasy points in from, this is our proprietary formula, but this is how we come up with the points based on the players that we've chosen. What we're only going to do, we're only going to run these formulas on 21 players and not 179 players. So one thing we do is the projections based on their results from last year. So we get fantasy data to give us projections on for the quarter, either the two quarterbacks, for the yards passing, passing completions, interceptions, and all that sort of stuff. For the other players, we use obviously their position data. Running backs give us rushes and touchdowns, and sometimes running backs give us receptions. Receivers, obviously, receptions and touchdowns, and sometimes rushes. But we come up with this data, and then we get a score sum based on their performance. Passes completed, passes intercepted, rushes, rushing touchdowns, receptions. DraftKings pays a 1 point per perception PPR point system, so you get points per reception, yards, touchdowns, and then we total all that up. And we also get their fantasy points from last year. We divide it by the number of games that they played in, and we come up with their average fantasy points. This is not always the same for DraftKings and FanDuel, so we use this raw number here. So let's look at this quarterback, Felipe Franks. Based on his data from last year, 19.71. If we look at his DraftKings, let's see, 20.42. It's not always exactly the same, so I like to use a couple different sources for this, and we come up with these points. Now we're going to use both the 19.71 and the actual DraftKings average, and we're gonna average them into a number that we come up with a multiplier for their projection. But I'm not going to use one or the other. I'm going to use both and then use an average of the two scores. So we put all this into a common line, and we come up with a number for each player of the 21 players that we think will be potential point contributors in this contest. We take these averages or these numbers and average them into a number that we use in our projection as a projection in our calculator. Okay, now this is the single game DFS calculator that you get when you order single game DFS, the single game tool. It shows you not only how to use this calculator, but how to build it. So you can actually build it yourself and make changes to it and use data that you've incorporated in different ways, or change the formula for points for the calculations. Some critical things that it has you decide. Oh, by the way, I want to mention one other thing before I go into this calculator. There are different people in these contests that you have to really do some research to make sure you're getting all the players that are valuable to the contest, potential point contributors. Cameron Harris changed his name. For some reason, I have no idea why, but he changed his name from Cameron Davis to Cameron Harris. And I was really searching to find out where he came from. I can't figure out how I figured it out, but I would be very careful about listing only the appropriate players for the game and not including people that won't be, not only not including people that won't likely contribute points, but don't forget to include strong people who will contribute points. And if you had missed this guy, he's got a weird first name, Cameron. Maybe that's how I found it. But Cameron Harris used to be Cameron Davis. He's a running back, and you can see on our... Yeah, there's no... Maybe I just did this. I couldn't find him, so I searched him. That's what I did. Couldn't find him, so I just Googled him. Formerly Cameron Davis, now Cameron Harris. I don't know why he changed his name, but here's why I wanted him in here, because he's very likely... It's the bottom one. He's the last one in here because I had to figure out what the heck to do with him. He's very likely to contribute 10 fantasy points in this contest, which is, if you rank these, which we do in our... We'll go back to our points calculation system. He is ranked... So we take... Our calculator takes the points projected and ranks them for the utility and captain. So we try to figure out who should be captain and what 5 players should be utility. We rank the points projected points, and then those get scored higher in our calculator as we run sims on the game to figure out who should be in the lineup. So let's take a look at Cameron Harris. Here he is. So here he is for captain. He's the 7th out of 21. We have a total of 21 players. He's the 7th highest ranked points person. So he's the 7th highest ranked player in this contest, and we may have not even put him in here if we had listed him as Cameron Davis. So you got to do a lot of diligence to make sure you're getting all the players that can potentially contribute points and eliminate the players who obviously won't probably contribute anything. So our calculator, and again, you can get this at singlegamedfs.com, and you can actually build it, and it's a good thing to do to build it because you can understand how it works. It will give you lots of great ideas as far as input that should be included, and it will really enhance your game as far as single game or any daily fantasy sport contest, just to determine how points are calculated. It'll really help you figure out what to do with your own determinations as you select and deselect players for contests. So one thing we do, so it takes in ranks, as we said, each player, and puts that rank here. And then we use those ranks in a random fashion and in a power selection fashion to determine our lineups. So it takes, one thing we do is we eliminate the 3 bottommost scoring ranks. So we take from 21 down to 18 and eliminate those players. They won't show up in either captain or utility spots. Then the captain does a random selection. It takes between 1 and the maximum of 1 to 18 and puts it in a spot. And then each of the 5 do the same. So we get a random number generator to pick these positions. Then we run our system, and it runs this calculation 175,000 times, and we pick the top scoring lineups from these parameters. So let's actually run this and see what it comes up with. And then we'll check our data just to see that we're coming up with a viable lineup, and we don't have glaring discrepancies that help not contribute to, or don't help contribute to winning slates. It'll take a few minutes to run here because it does run it pretty many times. We have this set to run 175,000 times and pick the top 150 lineups. And it'll take a minute or two to do that. So let's bear with it. I want to show you the actual time so you can see what we do as we come up with a lineup. It took us a long time to do this common line and fantasy data input, but it's worth it when you're doing we probably are going to play 1 to 3 showdown slates for college a week. So if it takes you an hour, 1 to 3 hours, and you're winning, it's worth it to do it carefully and see what you come up with. So let's just sort these here. Okay, so here's our lineup. So we have 150. This has taken the 175,000 rows of lineups and reduced it to the top 150 points scoring of the 175,000. So our top lineup, let's run it here and see if I can get these both in here. We want to make sure it's valid. If it gives us a salary cap, if we're using half the salary cap and we come up with a crappy lineup, it's obviously there's something wrong with the formula. So let's just put these guys in. So KJ Osborne, he's a wide receiver. That's a good captain. Jeff Thomas, wide receiver. Wide receivers are very valuable in these types of showdowns because they get a lot of quick points. They get a lot of yardage for receptions, and they get points per reception. And they're somewhat contrarian in that a number of different of these guys can get points versus just picking the 2 quarterbacks. Now, we'll probably have quarterbacks here. Let's see, Brevin Jordan. Quarterbacks obviously are valuable too, and they correlate to, so we have 3 wide receivers, but quarterbacks obviously are going to correlate to wide receivers being successful. Here's our first quarterback, Felipe and Josh Hammond. So far, 4 wide receivers and 1 quarterback, and Van Jefferson. You may have noticed recently in the past 5, 6, 7 years how football has changed from a running game to essentially a passing game. That's very true in the pros. I think I heard a stat that the 6 years of the least rushes per year of the last, since 1932, the 6 lowest years of rushes, or maybe it's the 4 lowest years, but the 4 lowest years of rushes in the entire history of the NFL since 1932 were the last 4 years. So the sport is changing from a running game with a few passes thrown in to a total passing game. So wide receivers are going to be your bread and butter in this, and quarterbacks correlate pretty clearly with that. So we have 5 wide receivers and a quarterback. So let's see here. We have Franks is the quarterback of the Florida team, and he has 2 of his wide receivers, and we have 3 Miami receivers. So this is a decent lineup. It only has $5,500 in salary remaining, which in a college game is acceptable. You can leave a lot of money on the table in a showdown slate for college. Again, these guys doing their projections and their numerical calculations and all that for DraftKings and FanDuel, they are still trying to figure out who's going to be productive in these events too. So to leave money on the table in a showdown event is not uncommon, and we like it for the one reason it's very contrarian. You can separate yourself from other people in the slate, and you don't need to be afraid of it because it often produces the winning lineup. All right, so let's take a look at one more just to double check our work again. So here we'll go to our second most viable lineup. Let's clear this out. And this time we have Franks as the captain, the quarterback, Osborne, Hammond, and Jefferson. We're doing this early in the week too. We'll obviously we'll redo this closer to game time just to see if anything's to slate lock game time, to see if anything's changed during the week or anybody's been hurt or suspended or didn't make grades to stay on the team. There are a lot of weird things that happen in college slates that you have to be careful about. Okay, Brevin Jordan. And Perrine. Okay, this time we used up all the salary. Another good indication that the calculator, the simulator, is running appropriately and accurately for us. It's finding the top points, but it sometimes uses all of the salary. So we know it's tuned into getting the best players, and sometimes we have some contrarian with a few $1,000s off. But we're not getting salary caps here of $23,000 or really, really low salaries. They're all in the high to mid 40s for these top points. So we'll probably enter this contest 20 times, 25 times with these top 20 lineups. And with the tool here, we can just copy and paste these right in to DraftKings and run it. Actually, I'll do that for you here. So let's take that. We'll go to the lobby. Here, let me do this accurately. So, go to the lobby, pick the slate. We'll go to the dollar contest. Dollar contest will bulk enter. So what I do is I pick a dummy lineup. Just pick 5 players. Enter. Then I go to bulk. And here, this particular slate only has 17 entries. So I've got one already. This is how I find the one I'm in. It's got the 1 All the others are 0. And I want to add 16 more. Submit. Okay, so now I have 16 entries of all the same lineup, that dummy lineup I created. I'm playing another baseball slate today, but here's the 17 now, 16 plus 1, 17 lineups in this college football slate for Saturday. So what I want to do is edit this. So it shows I have 17 entries. I'm going to download a sheet. This is how easy this is with Joe's tool from Single Game DFS. So here are my dummy lineups, 17 of the same lineups. I can just take the 17 top lineups, and I have to go to row 18, obviously, because I'm using row 1 as a title row, header row. So copy, paste, save it, and then I'll upload it. My entries file, DK entries, well, I think it's entries 1, entries 1. "17 of 17 successful," and I'll take a look at them. One other step I go through here is just to make sure I don't have duplicates. And if I do, I'll fix them. But it looks like I have 17 unique lineups now in this college contest. I'll refine them later in the week. It's only Monday. I'll do updates probably the morning of Saturday of the game. I mean, it's 4 p.m. game. I'm in California, so to me that's I think it's a 7 p.m. game because it's East Coast. So it's 4 p.m. Saturday. I'll start working on these guys and updating them between like noon and 4 p.m. on the date of the game to get the most current information in my projections. So that's it for this week of college football, the first week of the 2019-2020 season. Sign up at singlegamedfs.com and you can get these tools. We'll do one major sport. I'm going to throw in some of these videos and some of these projections for college, but we'll do one major sport, major pro sport for each of the major pro sports for FanDuel and DraftKings as they become live again, as NFL and NBA and hockey come live back on after baseball. But we'll do each of the major sports, and we may start to include some of the college. If it's not in the Single Game DFS product, I will offer some of them uniquely and for free on the Single Game DFS college that I do. I like college a lot because it has a lot of hard things to figure out. People have difficulty determining starting lineups. And we did really well last week in the college basketball season because of that, for that very reason. So we'll see you next time on our pro videos and some of the free college videos, and hope you sign up at Single Game DFS and look for our results on fantasyfifteen.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great slate.